Today's curiosity is assisted by a hired hand brown ale from Heritage Farms Brewing. They describe it as a medium-bodied English brown ale with flavors of biscuit and caramel and notes of toffee and light chocolate. I've had this one before and I am quite happy with it. So today I am taking a look at this little stage style light. I guess it kind of resembles the big professional lights, only it is, tiny. And it only cost me about $50. Comes with a very basic little manual which explains all the modes and stuff. I'll put a link to that later, I guess down below, and we'll look at it later a little bit closer. It comes with the power cord and the unit itself. It comes with a little remote control, batteries not included. And it comes with this little really cheap mounting bracket and half a dozen screws so that you can mount the bracket there and then screw it onto the wall or the ceiling or something. And I guess for like a basement rec room or a teenager's bedroom or something like that, this might be fun. Maybe a frat house or something like that, but definitely not professional lighting equipment. Let me just power it on and we'll take a closer look at some of the functions, and then we'll get into the meat of the video, which is taking it apart and seeing what's inside. So when it's first powered on, it goes through a homing routine, which is basically it drives the servo motors all the way to the end stops and crashes them into it for about 15 seconds until it can be convinced that it's actually found the end stops. And then, after waiting for a little while, actually no, it doesn't do anything. It waits for you to do something, either turning it on from the remote control or turning it on from the menu here. And go into the different channel modes or different modes: speed, display, infrared, reset. You can set a DMX address, the channels. I'll show you in the manual. That's probably the easiest way to do this. But a lot of these modes are also available on the remote control. Although the remote control doesn't allow you to set the DMX address, you can only do that from there. But most of the rest of these modes, like these automatic modes, you can do from the remote control as well. One thing you can't do from the remote control is just the motion. It just always does that when you're using the remote control. But that is under DMX control if you connect to the DMX input here and connect it to a control console or a computer running software, which is what I'm going to do momentarily. But anyway, on here you can pick different colors: red, green, blue, white, and then a mix of colors for the main one. And then there are 3 automatic modes that you can set it to across the bottom as well. Or you can step through different automatic modes with the auto button. But again, those are just autonomous. Oh yeah, and there's also sound activated mode. So it can do, things when your bass goes whomp, whomp, whomp in the room. But after not hearing anything for about 5 seconds, when it's in sound mode, it just shuts off. Just quickly look at the manual. It's got the different things that you can do from the remote control. And again, I'll put a link to the manual down below if you want to take a closer look at it. It's also got all the modes that are available on the control panel on the back. And it has the function modes for DMX control. So when you're controlling it from a DMX console, there are all the 13 channels that it runs and the different things that it does. Allow me to show you. So in DMX mode, channel 1 controls the rotation. Channel 2 controls the tilt, which goes to 180 degrees. The rotation is just shy of 360. You can't quite go all the way around, but that's okay. Channel 3 is the speed of rotation, so if we slow it way down and tell it to go through its full length of motion, you can see that it slows way down there. But if we bring the speed slider down there, it's much more responsive. That can be useful. 4 is just the master dimmer for all the lights. 5 is the strobe flash speed. We'll just leave that alone for now. 6 is red, 7 is green, 8 is blue, 9 is white. Let me just get these guys out of the way. There's what the white looks like. Different intensities. And then 10, let me just get rid of these guys. 10 is what they call fancy light strips, which are basically the halo around the outside. And at various different levels, you can set it through red, green, blue, and the intermediary colors, and then some patterns and whatnot. 11 is the speed for those patterns. And then 12 is if you want some just automatic color effects, which are the similar effects to what's going on in the automatic modes off the remote control. And there's several of them depending on where you put the fader. And then 13 is some macros. So again, we get into the automatic modes. You can go into sound mode if you want, if you push it up into the 200s range. It does normal sound activation stuff. But for DMX mode, you're normally going to be using the horizontal, vertical, and the colors. Oh, I've got the strobe on, don't I? Let's get rid of that. Where's the master dim? There we go. So the strobe just takes whatever color that you've got it set for and strobes that color. But I don't want strobe, I want normal. I don't want to give anybody seizures or anything. So that is the basics of it. So I went through the stock fixtures that are predefined in QLC and Q8 Plus, and there's over 1,200 lights defined, but none of them match this thing, so I just created my own definition for it, and we'll bring that in. And now if I go back to the Simple Desk, it's given me the icons and whatnot just to make it a little bit easier. That's just QLC stuff. That has nothing to do with the light. It just makes it a lot easier to work with. Anyway, that's not really what we came here to see, although, I mean, it is nice to see the thing go through its paces, and it definitely can do the thing. It's relatively bright as close as I am. Across the room, not so much, at least not in the brightly lit room. But in a dim room, it would probably be just fine. Anyway, let us do what we're here to do, which is take it apart and see what's inside the thing. The construction is fairly rough and ready. The screws are all visible to hold it together. There's a bunch holding those connectors in. There's some holding this yoke together. There's 4 up there holding probably the light fixture in the front of the top. And then there's 4 screws in the feet on the bottom. And I think that should be where we start. So, what secrets does that reveal when that finally pops off there? Oh, all manner of things. We have an obvious power supply. We have an obvious control board. We have a stepper motor. We have a little random board that is floating in the breeze in here. What is that? What are you? Oh, that's a little radio receiver board. Note the antenna, and it has a crystalline 13.52127 megahertz, presumably. And what is the chip? What is it? CR531L? That does not ring any bells, but it's pretty obvious that it is communicating with this remote control, even though the remote control looks like it should be infrared. Although, wait a minute. Is there an infrared receiver on obvious position in this thing? I haven't seen one yet. So 2 screws to yoink out the power supply. A couple of connectors on there. AC in and DC out. Let's see what we've got in here. Oh, we have the AC in there. We have a 2 amp fuse, which is nice. On the back, we have a little bridge rectifier. We have a 6-pin switch mode power supply chip. Handful of resistors and whatnot. We have a transistor, probably MOSFET, that is being driven by that little control chip. Bashes through to the transformer as an AC signal, high frequency. On the secondary side of the transformer, we have a couple of beefy diodes in parallel and a smoothing capacitor. We have a little voltage reference there with some capacitors and resistors, which go to the opto-isolator, which goes back to the little 6-pin control chip. Nice. We have a Class Y capacitor there, at least it claims to be Class Y. And we have a nice large gap between the high voltage and low voltage section. That seems to be a fairly well designed little circuit. I don't see anything obvious to complain about on that power supply, which is a little bit unexpected, but so be it. And that power supply is putting out a fairly nice 12 volts. Cool. That power supply came out fairly easily and goes back in just as easily. That is nice. Plugs on both sides. Sure. Now then, this main board, it's got screws that go through behind a little sticker there, and there are little nuts on the board that are holding it in place. That's going to be a little bit more awkward to get out. I don't really want to peel the sticker off, but I think that might be the easiest way to get in there. You can always glue it back on or double-sided tape it back on. I'm going to guess that's how it's already stuck on there. Yeah, there we go. That might damage that beyond repair. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Well, that's a little bit awkward. And it's also going to be awkward because there's spacers in there that are holding that, screw in alignment, but we'll, again, cross that bridge when we get to it. So now then, that board should just come right out. There we go. So on this side, we just have a 4-digit 7-segment display and the 4 buttons, which is not really a surprise. The plugs are labeled. There's a V plus and V minus there, which is, and that's not the one that's coming in. That's something else that's going out to stuff. There is the 12 volts and ground coming in from our power supply. That is not marked. Here we have a receive transmit ground and 5 volts. 5 volts ground and signal, 5 volts ground and signal. One of those is this, a little receiver board here. It doesn't say much more about it. And then on the back side here, we have that connector is labeled DMX. Okay. These connectors down here are labeled fan. That's the ones that say 5 volts on them. This connector is not labeled, but it goes to the stepper motor, the rotation stepper motor, and it comes straight out of this chip, which is going to be a stepper motor driver chip. That is a voltage regulator down there, specifically a 7805. So that's where the 5 volts is coming from. That's being referenced on these other connectors. This guy down here beside the DMX connector is obviously going to be a DMX line driver. There's a little Zener diode down there and another one there. So those will be protecting against severe overvoltages, which is kind of nice. And then we have the main microcontroller, which is driving everything. That part number doesn't mean anything to me, but I guess we'll go and look it up and just see if it is something we can find. Well, that wasn't too hard to find. It's an ARM Cortex 32-bit with flash and SRAM, and there's a data sheet, and you can get them for 66 cents each from LSCSC and various other places probably. And after translating the data sheet, we can find a little bit more about it. 64K flash, 8K RAM. So it is this variant here. It has timers and SPI and I2C and UART. And it has 39 GPIOs. It has 1 ADC. Okay, the clock runs at 64 meg. It runs up to 5 volts, which is why there's a 5 volt regulator on there. And on and on and on. This is a 72-page data sheet. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I think we've got the basics of it. I guess we can take a closer look at that stepper driver too. It is, and you can't see that, but it looks to me like it's an 8549, which unsurprisingly is exactly what we thought it was, a 12-volt stepper motor driver. Works just like that, just like what you would expect, actually. It's got a couple of inputs, probably a clock and a direction and enable, outputs for 2 coils, power, and there you go. Oh, okay, it's not actually doing direction and step. It is directly controlling the motors. Okay. So you have your microcontroller actually has to pulse the 2 input lines in sequence to get it to step around and do its thing. It's a little bit older way of doing it, but stepper motors have been driven successfully like that for years, so it's not a big deal that it's actually doing it that way. And other than that, there is, what do we have here? We have 4 wires going up through the hollow shaft in the middle of the stepper motor, heading up to the top. And those are a couple of power wires, V plus and V minus from down there, and a blue and a black wire from, nope, not that one, I'm sorry. It is this blue and white wire over here, which are labeled transmit and receive. So those 4 wires go up through the center there and into this yoke and find their way up towards the head. So I'm going to guess that the stepper motor for the head is inside there, and that's the next place that we'll have to look. But I think first I will go to the discomfort of putting all this back together. The hardest part, of course, is going to be threading those screws back on. Where does this go? That's the DMX wire. That goes there. I'll spare you this pain, and I'll just return when I've got this thing bolted back in place here. One thing I am going to change, though, when I reassemble this is this little radio board. I am going to stick it down with some of this super strong mounting tape. I'll stick it onto something plastic up there, and hopefully it won't be flopping around in the breeze. Although I guess I probably should zip tie that wire on just in case it breaks loose. But yeah, that wasn't impressive. The board itself, the power supply, yeah, that thing, not so much. So now to look at the top here, and I'm going to guess that this is how we get in. These 4 screws around the back of the lens here. Well, not really a lens. The light source, I guess we'll call it. At least with the bearings in that motor on the bottom, it rotates quite easily. That's nice. So, what surprises do we have up here? Ooh, big heatsink. And again, everything's on plugs, so I'm just going to unplug the... No, I'm not going to unplug it, I guess. Okay. How do we get that board out of there? It doesn't look to be screwed in, unless there's a screw from the back or something. Oh no, there's a couple of screws down here that may clamshell this piece together. Let's see what happens there. Okay, that part comes off. Okay. So there is our fan. It's 12-volt fan. That's coming off this circuit board in the head here. Oh, the motor's over here. Okay. So there is the motor shaft for the tilt motor. That's located inside that yoke, and then all the wires disappear out to that direction. So that's just a very basic little fan, and it's also a very noisy little fan, so that would be fairly easy to replace, I would expect, with just another little 12-volt fan. Good to know if you wanted to quiet this thing down a little bit. Now then, what else is holding this board in? Oh, a big blob of glue in there. Okay. Well, I don't know that we need to completely remove it anyway. We can just take a look from up here. So I'm going to guess that the transmit and receive coming from the bottom, well, I'm pretty confident it's those wires there, which are going to be talking to this little microcontroller, which I don't know if I can see it well enough to get a part number off it. It looks like it is the same microcontroller as the one on the bottom, which doesn't surprise me. There is another voltage regulator. 1, 2, 3, 4 transistors, probably driving RGBW, which would be that there, which is not a surprise. And then 3 wires going up to our little halo ring there, coming off back there. And that connector is labeled 5 volts grounded signal. So that is going to probably be addressable LEDs, WS2812 or something similar to that, in a LED neon form factor. I wonder if I can pry that out of there. It looks like it's just kind of wedged in. Don't really want to destroy it, but on the other hand, I am super curious. Well, there's what's inside the end of that tape, and that really does look like Neopixel or WS2812 LEDs in this little flexible translucent coating, which is exactly what this LED neon stuff is, although this is the standard stuff that you've seen, Big Clive and a bunch of other people playing with. This is much, much smaller. So I'm going to have to keep my eye out and see if I can find some of that standalone. Just because, it'll bend into tighter spaces than this bigger stuff. Still, cool. Anyway, we'll just nudge that back in there and pretend that we hadn't subjected it to this kind of offense. Sure, that's close enough, I guess. So, what else do we need to know about this? Well, oh, there's one other chip down there, and that is beside this little 4-wire harness. That will be the stepper motor driver, and that will run all the way through this yoke and up to this little stepper motor in here, which is a much smaller stepper motor. Oh, very interesting construction. And honestly, it's not as horrible as I was expecting it to be. I mean, there are corners cut, don't get me wrong, and it all makes kind of logical sense what's going on inside here. Now then, how do I put all this back together? You can place your bets down below whether it's going to work after I've put it back together. I'm about 80%. I haven't actually pulled on anything too hard, but we will have to see what happens. Come on, get in. There we go. Oh, okay, fine. We'll take a look under here and see what this stepper motor is. I guess we're this close. We might as well just check the last thing that we didn't look at. So, what do we have under here? We have me opening the wrong side. Oh, but there is a nice bearing in there. That is cool. This shows all the wires coming up and in. Again, there's the power and signal wires coming in, and then there's the stepper motor wires going out to the other side. So now if I take off the side that I intended to take off, there is the stepper motor, and oh wow, that is a tiny little stepper motor. That is very similar to the ones that come in some of the Arduino kits, isn't it? Huh, neat. Anyway, I don't know what else we expected to see. There's no numbers or anything on it. So now then, to put it all back together. Well, that went as well as could be expected, I guess. It was a little frustrating getting some of the screws back in. And that sticker is, as expected, a little bit damaged, but it's sticking back down. But the important thing is, does it actually still function? And it's doing its warm-up routine and its homing sequence, crashing into the end stops. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And we'll see what happens when it finishes this little dance. Okay, it's sitting there. It is doing something. It appears to be under control of DMX again, which is exactly what it should be doing. I don't want to aim that right at the camera or my eyes. Let's put it over there. So we can do that, we can do that, we can do that. White works. Well, it's an interesting little light. It's surprisingly less funky than I expected. It's relatively solid inside. Decent power supply from what I can tell. I was a little surprised that this remote control is actually RF powered. If I hide that and turn it to auto mode, yeah, hiding the infrared thing does exactly what I had expected. Neat. So plug that back into DMX, and there it goes back up to where it was. Cool. Well, can I recommend this? Not for anything serious. As I said before, if you're doing like a basement disco or a frat house or something of that level of, seriousness, then sure. Would I use it on a professional stage? Well, if it was in a position where it was likely to get damaged, like on the floor of a Gwar show or something like that, maybe. Probably not. But a Gwar tribute band in a dive bar where the stuff on the ground is going to get destroyed? Possibly? I don't know. It cost me all of $50, so I don't know. It's a neat little light. Like I said, it's not as bad as I expected it to be for that price, but it's still a cheap plastic light with no ground, no safety for hanging, no real way of mounting it other than, sitting it on the ground or bolting it to the wall with this cheap little bracket, which I wouldn't trust overhead. On a wall where it's not going to fall on anybody, maybe, but not on the ceiling. Anyway, I appreciate you watching. Thanks for that. And questions or comments down below. I will put a link to where I bought this thing, and that page will have a link to the manual for it inside, which is basically just a PDF of that manual if you're interested in looking closer. Thanks for watching. I appreciate that as always. Did I say questions or comments down below? You've heard me say that 100 times. Talk to you later.